My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content. Hey gang, welcome back. Have you ever thought about raising capital, but you've been a little bit nervous about it because you're not sure if you're going to do it the right way, or if you are doing it the right way, if you're crossing the line legally, if you might get into trouble with securities? And I tell you what, I've seen a lot of stuff over the years, and quite often people screw this up. They're just blasting stuff all over social media. They're just talking up a storm. They're advertising returns and rates and guarantees and all this kind of stuff. It makes me cringe, but not as much as it makes our guest cringe, because Nick McGrue is a legal whiz, especially when it comes to real estate and real estate investors and legalities around raising capital properly and doing syndications the right way. So zooming in from beautiful Los Angeles, California, let's welcome Nick McGrue. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Hey, happy to have you here, my friend. So give us a little snapshot of when it comes to working with real estate investors, when it comes to raising capital or doing syndications. How do you help your clients? Big, broad strokes.
Yeah, so the big picture is that I always tell people kind of the cheat code is that if you have passive investors, so you have people that they're going to write you a check and they expect to get a bigger check back, then it's likely that you're selling a security. And so with that, there's lots of rules and regulations around that. And you either have to register or have an exemption. And so with our clients, the registration process far too expensive and far too long of a process. And so we help clients figure out which exemptions could work for them. And then we figure out what their goals are and help them determine which is the best exemption for them to use. And then we make sure that they comply with that exemption.
Okay, cool. That's a good synopsis there. So let's say I'm a mom and pop real estate investor. I've got a couple of properties under my belt that I've self-financed up until now. I want to get into another, let's say a duplex or a triplex or something like that. I can't quite swing it financially for the down payment myself. So I'm thinking, early days, what if I do a joint venture with somebody else and they bring in the money and we're both on title of that property, but I'm doing most of the work? Is that still something we have to be concerned about with securities, or is that safer?
That's something that should at least raise the red flag. Now, if the person is taking somewhat of an active role, and then also when you have smaller deals like that, a duplex is relatively smaller, the concerns are a bit less. And particularly with their name on title, then they're actually owning the property. So then that also lowers the securities concerns as well. But I wouldn't say that as a blanket rule, if it's a duplex and two people, that you're good to go. A lot of times you likely would be, but we'd have to dive in and see exactly what are they doing, what are the requirements of the property, and making sure that they have some sort of material active role in the deal.
Okay, so again, you're coming from this from a legal standpoint, so I get it. Got to cross the T's, dot the I's. That's your job. But you also have to understand you're working with mom and pop real estate investors. So how do you help them get through all this crap without going broke trying to do a damn duplex deal legally? Like realistically, what does that look like, Nick?
Yeah, because you hit it on the nose that, with a duplex, unless it's some very expensive duplex, it likely just
Well, no, we're not talking LA. You're in LA.
Yeah.
I'm talking outside of
Even in
California.
LA, yeah, the costs of doing a full-on syndication just are not going to make any sense. So
Yeah.
something like that, I'd say, okay, let's look at your partner. What, skill sets and, valuable things can they bring to this deal? And let's make sure that they're having a material and active role. Because
what if they don't want to have a material or active role? Like literally, they want to put some money in. You've got some experience doing deals. Like, how could you structure that so that everybody's happy and nobody's going to be getting in trouble? Like,
So with something like that, potentially you might have state exemptions. And then also, even on the federal side, it's commonly referred to as the friends and family exemption. However, it's often
Okay.
used incorrectly.
Yeah.
But you might fall under the friends and family exemption as well, and so that might be an option. And again, you
Okay.
want to be very careful with these because, with one person, yes, a lot more likely to fall under friends and family. But I get clients that are like, okay, well, we just got like 10 people and it's a joint venture with all 10 of us.
Yeah.
And I'm
And we're
like,
all friends.
if
We're
you
all
ever
really
had an
close.
issue, the SEC
Yeah.
is going to realize what's really going on.
Yeah. So it is, and again, I'm just saying, practically speaking, it's probably not going to be an issue until somebody makes it an issue. And that's usually where the deal falls apart and the quote unquote joint venture partner, the passive investor, doesn't get the kind of returns they were promised or isn't getting, they're not happy. That's where it could potentially go awry. Would that be fair to say? Like if they
Correct.
complain, that's where it gets, that's where it
Yeah, I
gets
always
ugly.
give the analogy is that, I've sped before in the car. I speed. I don't always go the speed limit, but I don't get tickets. That doesn't mean that what I did was lawful. It just means that nobody saw it. So
You
similar with
haven't, you
this
haven't
is
got
that
caught yet. Exactly. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
similar with this is that I tell clients, the SEC is not knocking on doors saying, "Show me your documents, let me see all your deals." They come into play when, yeah, there's an investor usually that's unhappy or something goes wrong, and then they
Mhm.
contact the SEC, and now the SEC is like, "Okay, let me see that you're compliant," and that's where we start getting our issues.
Yeah, exactly. All right, fair enough. Now let's go to the next level, Nick. Let's talk about, okay, we're starting to get into bigger deals. We want to start doing this syndication thing, or we think we want to do a syndication. What are the different options once you're starting to get into that, you know, beyond a joint venture kind of realm?
Yeah, you've got quite a bit of options. There's quite a bit of exemptions, but I'd say the primary one that works really well for real estate is called Regulation D. Some of the great things about that is that you have an unlimited amount of capital that you can raise, so you're not capped on how much you can raise. You also have an unlimited amount of investors that you can take on. With that, there are some requirements as to the financial status of your investors. But one of the great things about it is that you can do a Regulation D raise basically as quickly as you and your attorney get everything together. So you're
Mhm.
not having to send things to the SEC and have them approve it and things like that. So once you and your team get all the ducks in a row and are ready to raise, you can do it. And so we typically tell clients it takes us about 4 weeks, but we've done some as quickly as 10 days. Is a rush job and had to get that taken care of. But yeah, we had it up and ready to raise in 10 days. So most of the other exemptions are going to take a bit more time than that. So that's why I like Reg D a lot. Because in real estate, if you're under contract, you've got a time period that you're dealing with, and you've got
Yeah.
to be able to get all your securities exemptions set up, and then also raise that capital before the closing time comes. So you're in a time crunch. So Reg D works really well for real estate.
So Nick, there's tons of different forms of law or different focuses or different specialities. Why did you decide to focus more along the real estate side of things, and especially with the capital raising, the security side of things as well?
Yeah, so I've always just been fascinated with real estate. Even when I was little, I'd say, one day I want to maybe have my name on one of those high rises or something like that. Not realizing now that a lot of times it's just the big leaseholder whose name is on it. But I've always been fascinated with real estate, always enjoyed real estate. Even in law school, as you mentioned, you don't get a real estate law degree or a criminal law degree. You just get a law degree. Your first year of law school for all across the country is basically the same. But then after that, you can do electives. And so I focus my electives on real estate and business because that's the areas that I wanted to move into.
Yeah.
And so when I started out, I was just doing real estate transactions, so helping clients acquire and sell the businesses, and then also working with just small businesses with their random legal matters. And so the first syndication that I did actually was for a winery. The winery was family owned and is a family that the grandfather had made a lot of money, and then the grandfather's kids kind of didn't do much, and so now I was dealing with the grandkids,
Who
and
are
one of the
doing
grandson.
even less.
Yeah, there was one grandson that had gone to business school and was like, "Hey,
Okay.
we're struggling with this winery. We need to right the ship, and so we need to raise some capital." So we sold off a portion of the winery to allow them to get the capital to do renovations and things like that. And
I
so
see.
that's kind of random. And then about 2 years later, I had a client that was very heavy in real estate that had multiple single properties and small plexes. And she was saying, all this management, I've got like 30 properties and the management's a pain. And I was like, yeah, you should consolidate and just buy, like a 30 unit. And then a few weeks later, she calls me back and she had gone bigger. She's like, "Hey, I found one that's 100 units, but I have to raise some capital. Have you heard of this thing called syndication?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually have done that with a winery." And so with that client was the first really true real estate syndication, and I really liked it a lot. I just enjoyed. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to the law stuff, but I really enjoyed working through it, and then slowly started building more and more. And so now I'd say syndication funds, securities is about 60 to 70% of what we do.
Wow, that's significant. Awesome, Nick.
Yeah.
So, because it's so significant, and you've worked with a variety of different clients doing all sorts of different things. I would imagine that you've seen some kind of creative ways that they raise capital, but still stay within the lines, so to speak. So, what are some of those ways that you've seen other people raising capital creatively, but still legally?
Yeah, so one that I found, because you mentioned talking about the down payments for the duplex in the earlier example.
Yeah.
So one thing that some clients have been doing is actually creating funds that are to take to essentially lend. And so seen some where they have a fund where they have a big pool of money and it's there. And so if somebody's like, "Hey, I need, 50 grand to close or what have you," they can lend that 50 grand and have, a securitize the property and then get paid back on that. So setting up securities to lend so that people can acquire as one. I've seen some situations where people will say, "You know what, I don't want to operate. I want to be invested in real estate. I kind of want to be a little active, but I don't want to have to deal with acquisitions and due diligence and all that. But I do like dealing with investors." And so typically, you're not allowed to get compensated for raising capital unless you have a securities license. But if you create your own fund, there's no requirement to have a license to have your own fund. And so I've had some
Interesting.
clients that say, "Hey, I want to be involved, but not fully involved." And so they'll create a fund. And what they're doing is they're working with investors to get capital into the fund. And then they're also creating relationships with operators saying, "Hey, who's needing some capital? Who's needing some investment? And my fund can make some investments in your deals."
So, kind of people hearing a lot about the fund of fund kind of models. Is that kind of what you're talking about there?
That as well, yeah, yeah, because nothing stops somebody from having fun, assuming that they have all the T's crossed and I's dotted and the paperwork and everything. Yeah, it's one thing that a lot of people are surprised about is that you're not required to be licensed to be a fund manager.
Yeah, no, that it's fascinating. Not required to have a license at this point.
Yes,
Wait until enough people screw it up, then regulations come in. That's what
that's
usually
about
happens.
how it works. Yes.
Awesome, Nick. So, yeah, speaking of raising capital and that sort of thing, I know you're not directly involved in that, but you are indirectly very involved in that. So, what are you seeing these days that's working well for your clients to find investors for their funds or for their syndications or things like that? Are you seeing anything interesting along those lines that have stuck out for you?
Nothing too unique. Really, it is a relationship-based business.
Yeah.
So just keeping those relationships strong. I'd say one thing that good capital raisers do, good clients that are able to meet their raise needs, is communication, both before the
Mhm.
deal and during the deal and after the deal.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in a part of the market cycle to where deals are not going as easy as they were 3 or 4 years ago.
Or
Before,
not going according to plan at all.
yeah,
Quite
yeah,
often.
before you could get into a deal, not really know what you're doing, buy it way too high, and just time would have saved you. Now
Yeah.
you got to be a lot more strategic and a lot more skilled. And, unfortunately, some people are having to do capital calls where they're saying, "Hey, investor, we need you to invest more money if you want to save the money that you already invested." And so I've had a couple clients that one of them I talked with, and she was like, "Yeah, I had to make these calls. I really hated it." And she's like, "Well, one of my investors was like, 'Thank you.'" And it was a seasoned investor, so he gets what's going on. And he's like, "Listen, I appreciate that you took the time to call me. I've had, 5 other capital calls, and I get an email saying, 'Hey, give me more money.' Whereas you're taking the time to call me, to let me know what's going on, to tell me why it happened, what you're doing to right the ship." And he thanked her for doing a capital call. I was like, "Wow, that's pretty crazy. You don't usually get that." So that's one thing
Yeah.
that just reiterated to me more the importance of that communication and the importance of keeping that relationship strong.
Yeah, that's good advice. Nick, I'm sure you've seen some really cringy things out there with people raising capital the wrong way. What kind of pops out to you the most is like you see it over and over again. It's just like you shake your head and go, ah.
Yeah.
Anything pop to mind?
The biggest one is a run-of-the-mill deal. Maybe it's like $10 million, which is not no money, but that's a fairly run-of-the-mill type of apartment syndication deal.
Mhm.
And I'll see 50 GPs on it, 50 management on the management team. And
Yeah.
really what it is that you've got like 3 or 4 GPs and then 45 capital raisers, and they're trying to
Yeah.
get around the compensating for capital. And yeah, that's just is not a good thing to do because again, with nobody, if nobody rats on you, nothing happens. But if the SEC gets wind of that, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do, and I don't think you'll be able to explain all that you need to.
Well said. Well said. Awesome, Nick. Well, this has been very enlightening. Thank you so much for your insights and your input. If people would like to connect with you and find out more, where should they go?
Yeah, you can go to my website. The law firm is Polymath Legal, so that's www.polymathlegal.com. So that's POLYMATHLEGAL.com.
Where does the name come from?
So a polymath's kind of like a Renaissance person. So
Okay.
somebody who's learned it in many disciplines. And so I'm a very curious person. I have law, but then I play saxophone, I play magic, or practice magic, card magic. And so I'm just a very curious person and a curious entrepreneur. And so when I was starting the firm 15 years ago, I was like, I could call it the law offices of Nick McGrue, but we've heard a version of that before. So I
Yeah.
wanted something that stuck out. And I was like, what's something that represents me? And I was like, well, I consider myself a polymath. And then also the diversity of our clients, because we have clients that are raising capital for apartments, for buying businesses, for wineries. We've done one for a movie before, for storage. So our clients are kind of in various areas as well. And so I figured that polymath represents both me and the clients that we serve as well.
Well, there you go. I've never heard. I don't recall hearing that word before. So now I've learned something new as well. And do you only practice in California, or can you help people outside of California as well?
For securities, typically
Mm.
we're dealing with federal exemptions. And so I have clients that I'm doing federal securities work with all across the country.
Good. Good to know. Awesome, Nick. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, take care, and we will see you on the next one. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewsyou.com.